Hi and welcome to the Home Assistant How-To with Bearded Thinker. Today we will be installing and working with the Shelly Gas sensor. We'll start in 10 seconds. But before we begin, let me thank all the members who have joined my YouTube channel. Thank you very much, your support really means a lot. And now let's get started with the video. In the previous video I covered basics about the Shelly devices, general information about Shelly devices. I talked about internal Home Assistant integrations, but also ShellyforHASS, Home Assistant Community Store or HACS integration. As I said, there are pros and cons for both of them. Today we will be covering Shelly Gas, but we will be also talking about the Shellies Python script that allows you to integrate Shelly devices inside Home Assistant by using MQTT. But first, let's start talking about the Shelly Gas sensor itself. Shelly Gas sensor arrives in two versions, CNG and LPG. You have to check out which version works for you. One version is more oriented to the gas that has more methane, and the other version is the version with more butane or propane inside itself. If you are using CNG version, it will be a bit harder to test the device, as you will see later on. For the LPG version, you can use your gas lighter to test if it's working or not. Also, there are two additional versions of each of those. One is the EU version and the other one is US version. So, when you shop, be careful to buy a version that matches your needs. One thing that you must remember is that this device is not battery powered. It means that you will need to hook it up to electricity wherever you want to install it. There is one additional option for this sensor, and this is electric gas valve control. Even if you buy now just a sensor, later on you can buy a valve that will enable you to shut down the gas line when the gas leak is detected. Every Shell device, and also this device, enables you to integrate it with various options. First, and the native support is of course for the Shelly app, where it will be giving you alerts. This integration can, but also does not need to use cloud. The app itself can work locally, but also remotely. For the remote to work, you have to enable cloud integration. Once again, as with all the Shelly devices, there are a lot of options that you can use for integration, development, or whatever you want to do with them. But today I will be once again focusing on Home Assistant. Let's look at the gas sensor itself. On the front of the device, you have wireless network indicator. It can be either red or green. Then you have this perforated front, where you have LEDs. They give information on the sensor status, so green, everything okay, red, and also yellow or something like that. Green meaning that there is a power and everything is okay, red means that there is alarm, and yellow that there is a problem with the sensor itself. On the top of the sensor, you have test button. You have to press and hold it for your device to do a self-test. Every time you reconnect the device, please press this button and do a self-test of the device. On the side of the device there is a small hole for the reset switch. You can use provided pin in the box to reset the device to factory settings. On the back side of the device there is an interchangeable power grid connector. So for me I'm using this one, but you may arrive with a different one. It all depends on your region. And now let's look at the setup of the device. As with all Shelly devices, when you open the box and hook them up to your power grid, they will be creating their own access point. You can use your mobile phone to connect to that access point, and something like this will open. The default address for this is 192.168.33.1. Next step that you have to do is you have to go to Internet and Security, Wi-Fi mode, and here click and type the SSID for your Wi-Fi network. You have to type in your Wi-Fi network password, and if you want, you can tick this box and give the device a permanent IP address with the net mask, gateway, and optional DNS. I definitely would recommend that you also type in the gateway and DNS because it will later help you on with the firmware updates. One of the possibilities is that you will see here red arrows pointing to each other. That means that there is a newer firmware. If you go to Settings, Firmware Update, you will see here information about your current version and also the newer version of firmware if available. I'm currently only seeing a new beta version and I will not be updating to beta version. Let's briefly go through the settings. First, we have a volume information. I've set this one to 5 because the 7, which was default one, was just a bit too loud even for the testing purposes. Next, we have time zone and geolocation. Shelly was successful in finding my regional settings and information about my time zone, so I didn't have to change anything here. Then you have option to specify device name. I've let it be default one because I will only have one device. If I would have multiple devices, I will probably give them name something like a room where it is located. You have here factory reset, device reboot, is the device discoverable, and some basic information about the device, such as device ID, what is the Wi-Fi that is currently connected, and what is the signal quality of that Wi-Fi network. Why would you have this here? Because if we go to Internet and Security, there is an option to supply Wi-Fi client backup information. Here you would put alternative access point information. For example, if you have 2 access points, you would specify here the second one. While we are already in the Internet and Security, let's check other options. So we have access point information. This will allow you to access your Shelly Gas sensor directly without the Wi-Fi. Restrictor login allows you to specify username and password so that only the person with the credentials or username and password can access the device. SNTP server or NTP server, I presume, is the time server, and here we are using time server from Google. And there are 2 options that I mentioned in the previous video, and these are advanced and cloud. Cloud, as I said, allows you to enable cloud functionality, which means that you will get remote access to this device by using the Shelly app. And advanced settings, this is currently something that I did set up here, is to enable the MQTT functionality. And yes, unfortunately, when I talked about Shelly devices, I said there is no need for the MQTT. And that's correct for the Shelly plugs and for the Shelly EM. But in this case, and we will mention this later on, I had an issue with both Shelly integration that is inside Home Assistant, but also with the ShellyforHASS integration. So I did enable it. And what you have to do here, it's really pretty simple. You just have to enable it, give a username and password if your MQTT is using username and password, specify the IP address of your MQTT server. You can leave everything else as is, but I also tick box next to retain. Retain means that the MQTT server will be retaining last state in the saved states, so that even if, for example, Home Assistant is not available at that instance when the MQTT receives new message, it will be able to read the last state. This may not be that important for the gas sensor, but I may be wrong. But for example, if you are using something as a door window sensor, DW2, this information will be great because those devices are powered by battery and they often go to sleep mode, meaning no activity, no information. And the Home Assistant itself will not be knowing what is the last state if it was restarted at that time. I know, but this is general information. As usual with all the Shelly devices, we have here actions. And what are the actions? Actions are, let's call it like that, built-in automations inside Shelly devices that enable you to do something based on the activity or state of the sensor, in this case Shelly Gas. Let's look at them. So we have, as I said, 3 states: mild leak, heavy leak, and alarm off. And here you are able to do your own automations without any third-party home automation system, such as Home Assistant. So what you will do is, you will go here in mild leak, enable it, here type in the URL or the address that you want this trigger to call when there is alarm. So for example, you can, you can do here a REST command or something like that, that would be called when there is a mild leak. The same thing goes for the heavy leak And of course, this one can be triggered when the alarm goes off. Mute will kill sound from the system, and I don't think that this is something that you want to do. Self-test, on the other hand, is definitely something that you need to do and need to remember to do every time you reset your device. And it takes approximately 30 seconds. And there are two options on how you can trigger self-test. As I mentioned previously, you can press and hold the button on top of the sensor itself, like this, or you can push this button here. It takes approximately 30 seconds for the self-test to complete. And there was a sound, but we still need this to finish. And it's done. The alarm was tested, as you can see here. The one other option that I will not be able to show you is the valve, because my valve is not connected. If the valve would be connected here I would be able to test it. Mind you, the valve idea itself is pretty genius. The valve is, as you can see here, a device that you put on top of your pipe that hooks up to the valve, and it just moves the valve to open or shut state. And if I'm not mistaken, it's using only one wire to do so. And how it changes from the on to off or from open to close, it just reverses the polarity of the wire. So, to be able to use that simple device to control other valves with, I don't know, Shelly once or Shelly one else or Shelly uni, that would be great, and this is really something for Shelly to think of. Using this with the Shelly Gas is perfect, but you can use this for watering, you can use this for water valves, you can use this for multitude of other things. So it would be really great to see a possibility to hook this thing to some other Shelly devices, or to be able to use it as a standalone device. But you would need to provide it a power. So this was really a long intro. Let's now do one last thing and let's pretend we have a gas leak and see how it looks here. Yeah, I've simulated heavy leak. Don't worry, there isn't a leak. And it took me a bit of fiddling to do this, but yeah, it's working. So as you can see, there are two states depending on the number of particles per minute. It's now dropping, and we have now gone from the heavy leak to mild leak. Now let's go to Home Assistant. And now in Home Assistant we have two options. One is to use the internal Shelly integration, and the other option is to use the HACS Shelly4HASS component. First, let's install it with the internal Home Assistant integration. Let's go to Configuration, Integrations, and your devices should be discovered. If they are not discovered, there is a simple solution for that. You just go to Add Integration, type here Shelly, type here the host IP address. This can be either the static if you configured it or the dynamic. For that you will have to figure out how to get that address, and click on Submit. I myself will configure it by using the Configure button. Configure, Submit, select area, finish. And now we have this device set up. One device with the 6 entities. 2 entities are available. This is the information about the gas leak, so we are currently clear. The next one gives you the number of particles per minute. Then we have information about the Shelly cloud. Is there a firmware available? What is the quality of the wireless network? And the information about the uptime. And let's add this to Lovelace. In Lovelace now we have following information. Yes, it took about 30 seconds for everything to update, but what we have? We have gas information, it's clear. We have information about the count of particles per minute, it's also clear. Information about the cloud, and it's disconnected because, yeah, it is disconnected. Is there a firmware available? What is the quality of the Wi-Fi? And what is the uptime? Let me simulate now a gas leak and see what we get here from the informations. As you can see, it took me a bit, but we changed a couple of times state from clear to detected. And particles were getting a bit high. Let's remove this and let's use ShellyforHASS integration. Let's go to HACS, integrations, type here Shelly or find here ShellyforHASS, install this repository, install, and we will have to restart our Home Assistant. Before we restart our Home Assistant, let's go to Visual Studio Code and there make sure that you have at least one line, Shelly, but you can also add all 4 lines. It will be Shelly, version true, sensors all. After you've installed the HACS component and added this to your Home Assistant, go to Configuration, Server Control, check Configuration, and restart your Home Assistant. Now the system is back online. We have here 6 devices from the Shelly Smart Home. This is ShellyforHASS integration. We know that because we are using configuration YAML file. Let's go to Devices. Let's go to Shelly Gas. And let's add everything we have here to our Lovelace. And now we have a couple of things here. As you can see, we are missing the information about the particles per minute, which is something that is very shame for the ShellyforHASS, because previously ShellyforHASS was providing more information than the shell integration inside Home Assistant. What entities does ShellyforHASS provide? We have information about the ShellyforHASS state. It can be off or on, I think. We will check it right now. There is information about the cloud. It is disabled. It says that my MQTT is connected. We have information about the Wi-Fi network, both in a numerical, decibel, but also as a description. And the next entity is the uptime of the sensor. The one sensor I'm missing here, which I really would like to have, is particles per minute. So in case of ShellyforHASS, you have more options or more information inside the Home Assistant internal integration than you would have with the ShellyforHASS. Now let me try and simulate once again the gas leak for this sensor. And that was the status of the ShellyforHASS integration when there is a gas leak. But as I mentioned, there is a third option for the Shelly devices, which I have already configured inside Shelly. This was MQTT. For this to work, let me first go to Visual Studio Code, and at the bottom of our configuration YAML file, what I'll do, I'll add following: Python script. This will allow us to use Python scripts. Inside Python scripts folder, create new file and call this file Shellies, Shellies Discovery .py for Python. And from this URL, which you can find in the description, select raw, copy everything, go back to Visual Studio Code and paste it here. Save, and that's it. Shelly Discovery script is now installed. For this integration to work, we also need to create 2 automations. Again, the easiest way to do that is go to the URL and just copy this inside your automations YAML file. One will be Shellies Announce and the other will be Shellies Discovery. Let me copy this, go to Automations, and paste everything here. Let's go to Configuration, Server Control, check Configuration to see if automations did fit nicely. And we now need to restart our system. Yes, I'm aware that you can reload automations, but we did create A, new Python script, and B, we also activated the Python scripts integration. So nevertheless, you still need to restart your system. The system is still starting up, but let's go to Configuration, Integrations. What I want to do, I want to remove all those Shelly devices. We have already 41 devices here. As you can see, it already pulled the state from the Shelly Gas sensor. And let's add this all to Lovelace. Let's go to Overview, Shellies. This was the old status from the Shelly4HASS. So we had there information about the gas sensor. It was off. We had information about cloud, MQTT, Wi-Fi, and uptime. And here what we have information about the gas sensor. It's clear. Is there a firmware update? What is the concentration of particles per minute? We have the IP address of our Shelly4Gas sensor. Is it working normally? What is the quality of the Wi-Fi? What is the status of the self-test? To what SSID it is connected, and uptime. So let's check, for example, this self-test. If I would go to the web interface of the Shelly device and inside the web interface start self-test, as you can see here, it will change state to self-test running. After it finishes, I will also simulate the gas leak. And this was the information about the gas leak. As you can see, the concentration is still up, and we had state detected gas. What is the conclusion? Conclusion is that if you want to use Shelly4Gas, I would either use the internal Shelly integration for the Home Assistant, or I would use MQTT. But if you want, there is a possibility of using both MQTT and the internal or Shelly4HASS integration. For this, I will be using internal Shelly integration. So as you can see, those are the two options out of 3 options that you have for Home Assistant integration. In my case, in my setup, I'm using both MQTT and this integration here because it gives me most information I can get from the sensor. And what are your next steps? Well, the next step, of course, is to create automations. As this video has been longer than I wished or hoped for, I will not be covering any automations in this video, but the automations that I will be using will be available in a day or two on my GitHub repository. The link to my GitHub repository will be down in the comment section below. What I'll be creating, I will be creating a couple of automations. One will be triggered based on the status of on or off, or depending on there is a gas leak or not, and the other one will be depending on the status of the particles per minute or ppms. So you can go and check out my GitHub repository and get the automations from there. And this is it for this video on Shelly Gas sensor and integrations inside Home Assistant. I really do hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy this video, please give me a thumbs up because it means really a lot. If you have any kind of a comment or a question, you can always find me on the Discord server, but feel free to leave comment down in the comment section below. If you still haven't subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell button to get notified on the future updates. And I'll be seeing you next time. Until then, bye bye and have fun.